75. That number used to feel like it belonged to someone else, someone slower, someone who smelled like a doctor's waiting room, someone who watched the news with the volume turned all the way up. I never imagined it would be me, sitting at this kitchen table with this cup of coffee going cold, telling you the thing I wish someone had told me 30 years ago. But here I am. The average American man who makes it to 65 can expect to live into his mid-80s, 19 or 20 more years. That sounds like plenty of time, right? It sounds like a gift, and it is. Except nobody tells you how much of that time is borrowed. Nobody puts on the brochure that the healthy years, the years where you can actually move, actually travel, actually feel like yourself, those start narrowing a lot sooner than the actuarial tables admit. I was 71 when my knees started their slow rebellion. I was 72 when my cardiologist said the word chronic and moved on like it was nothing. And by then, I had already done everything right. I had followed every rule, listened to every expert, built what I thought was an ironclad plan. And I was still watching the floor. What I'm going to share with you today is not a story about winning the lottery or finding a miracle investment. I'm 75 years old. Those kinds of stories aren't mine to tell. What I'm going to tell you is the true story of how I became financially stronger after I retired, and how I did it by unlearning almost everything the retirement industry had taught me. If you're anywhere near my age, or you're helping someone who is, stay with me. Not because I'm asking you to like this video, but because I think somewhere in what I'm about to say, you're going to hear your own life. And I think you need to hear it from someone who has already walked this ground. I was 58 when I first walked into the HR office and asked for the retirement projection packet. I remember the carpet in that room, flat corporate gray, the kind that never shows dirt and never shows anything. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And then the woman across the desk slid a single printed sheet toward me with a number at the bottom. Projected 401k value at age 65, $847,000. I took that paper home, and I felt for the first time in a long time like I had actually won something. 23 years of contributions, most of them maxed. The market had done its job. I walked in that night, and my wife Carol was making pot roast, and I told her, we're going to be fine. 65, like the plan said. We'd sell the house in Ohio, move somewhere warm, maybe the Carolinas, maybe Tucson. We'd finally have the winters we had promised each other since our 30s. I believed it completely. I had read every book. I understood compound interest the way a man understands his own first name. I knew the difference between traditional and Roth. I had a fee-only financial planner who wore bow ties and used phrases like sequence of returns risk that I half understood but nodded along to with great confidence. I thought I was prepared. I thought preparation was the whole answer. That was the illusion I was living inside, and it felt warm and solid and completely real. There was a set of Callaway golf clubs I bought myself at 59. A small gift to my future self. I put them in the garage, in their bag, still wrapped in the plastic from the store. Every single time I walk past them, going to or from the car, I said the same thing in my head. Those are retirement clubs. I'll use them when I have time. That thought, I'll do it when I have time, was the anthem of my entire working life. The trip to Alaska we'd planned since our honeymoon. The weeks I promised Carol we'd take in the fall. The fishing I told my son I'd do with him every summer. All of it filed away under later, under time, under the assumption that time was an account that only grew. What I failed to build into any spreadsheet was the simple cost of being a human body. The cost of aging inside a country where one overnight hospital stay can erase a year's worth of careful saving. The cost of what 65 actually looks like in America, not the version on the Medicare supplement commercial with the silver-haired couple walking a golden retriever on the beach, but the real version, where your sleep breaks into pieces, where your joints file formal complaints, where the pill organizer you swore you'd never own is sitting on your bathroom counter next to your blood pressure monitor. And none of it is cheap. I hadn't priced out being human. I had priced out an abstraction. By 63, the math that had felt like bedrock at 58 was starting to look like silt. I kept having to add line items I hadn't imagined. Carol's hip replacement, my hearing aids, which Medicare wouldn't cover, the long-term care policy we probably should have bought 15 years earlier and now couldn't afford comfortably. 2 adult children who needed help at various points. Grandchildren whose college funds we wanted to contribute to because that felt like the right thing to do. Because we were the grandparents and that was the role. The spreadsheet kept expanding. The number at the bottom kept contracting. When I finally walked out of my office for the last time at 65, I didn't feel like a man crossing a finish line. I felt like someone who had just stepped off a moving train and was standing very still on a platform, watching it pull away, thinking, now what? The first 6 months were strange, in a way I hadn't prepared for and couldn't have. I had imagined retirement would feel like the first day of summer as a kid, that open, warm, formless feeling of days with no clock. What it actually felt like was a kind of low-grade disorientation, like jet lag that never quite resolved. My body still woke me at 6:47 every morning. Carol still left for her part-time job at the library, and I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, and I looked at the yard and I thought, I should feel happy, so why don't I feel happy? I started watching what we spent for the first time in my adult life with real granular attention. Not because we were in trouble, not immediately, but because every dollar going out no longer had a replacement coming in. Social Security helped. I had waited until 66 to file, which gave me a modestly higher monthly check. But higher is a relative word when that check is $2,300 and your property taxes alone are $8,400 a year, and Medicare Part B extracts its premium before the money even lands in your account. I had nearly $1 million in savings, and I felt like I was standing on ice, listening for cracks. Then came the hospital. It started as indigestion that I ignored for 3 weeks because I was a man of a certain generation and certain stubbornness, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who runs to the doctor for what might be nothing. By the time I went, they kept me for 2 nights. The bill after Medicare was $4,200. I remember sitting in that hospital bed on a Tuesday, staring at the cardiac monitor, listening to the beeping, and my mind drifted to the garage and the golf clubs. When had I last been outside for more than 20 minutes at a stretch? When had I last moved my body with any kind of purpose? The thought that came next was the one that changed everything, though I didn't know it yet. I had been saving my life for later, and later was starting to look like now, whether I was ready or not. The full weight of it didn't arrive in the hospital. It arrived 6 weeks later, at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, when I opened the explanation of benefits from Medicare, and then sat down with a legal pad and did the real accounting. What had we spent on health in the previous 12 months? All of it. Premiums, out-of-pocket costs, prescriptions, Carol's physical therapy, my cardiology follow-ups, her dental work, my hearing aids again because I'd lost one. I added it up twice because I didn't believe the first total. $23,000 for 1 year. And we were both, by any clinical measure, relatively healthy. No cancer, no organ failure, no major ongoing condition beyond the ordinary accumulations of age. This was just the baseline cost of being old in America. And I had budgeted $12,000. I called my financial planner. He wasn't shocked. He said most of his retired couples underestimate health care costs by at least 30 to 40%. He said he wished someone had told me a decade earlier to budget closer to $20,000 to $25,000 a year for 2 people our age in our state. He said it the way you say things that are true and regrettable but unchangeable. And I sat there and I thought, I spent 40 years being told to maximize my 401k. Nobody once told me to plan for what it actually costs to live inside a body that's been running for 7 decades. I started reading everything I could find. Every study on healthcare expenditure and retirement. Every paper on Social Security optimization. Every analysis of sequence of returns risk. And the more I read, the more I felt a very specific kind of sorrow. Not about money lost, but about time spent under a misconception. I had built the wrong kind of wealth for 40 years. I had treated retirement like a destination and forgot to check whether the roads I was building actually led there. The turning point was not a dramatic event. There was no single thunderclap. It came on a Sunday afternoon in October, 3.5 years into my retirement. Carol and I had just returned from a week in Portugal, a trip we had nearly canceled 4 times for different reasons. Cost, my health, her hesitation, my hesitation. We went anyway. And I remember sitting on the back porch the Sunday evening we got back, watching the maple in the yard drop its leaves in the October light, and feeling something I had not felt in years. I felt awake. Not alert, awake. In the way you feel when you've been half asleep for a very long time, without knowing it. and something finally shakes you into clarity. The trip had cost $6,200 for the two of us. A year earlier, that number would have made me physically uncomfortable. But in Lisbon, walking through the Alfama in the late afternoon, Carol laughing at something, the light going amber over the Tagus River, I had thought very clearly, this is why the money exists, not to be preserved, to be lived. And then my knees had told me, quietly but firmly, that this would be the last trip of this kind. The last one where I could walk for hours without paying for it in pain for a week after. And that truth, instead of making me sad, made me fierce. I came home and I made a list, not a financial plan, a values list. What do I actually want from the time I have left? What have I been deferring that I can no longer afford to defer? And then I made a second list. What am I still capable of producing? Because here is what nobody in the retirement industry tells you. Leaving work does not mean you have nothing left to give. I had 35 years in supply chain and operations management. There were companies who would have paid me serious consulting fees for that knowledge, and I had been sitting on it like it was something shameful, like working after retirement was a sign that the plan had failed. I had been leaving money on the table while feeling broke. I called my financial planner and told him I wanted to restructure the entire approach. I wanted to build a dedicated spending bucket for experiences and health, not as an emergency fund, but as a first priority fund. I wanted to model what Carol's Social Security would look like if she waited to file until 70, which was still 2 years away. We ran the numbers. The difference in her lifetime benefit if she lived to 85 was substantial. Decisions that felt small had real compounding consequences. And I started consulting 15 to 20 hours a week from home at a day rate that reflected what 35 years of expertise was actually worth. The first year, that income was just under $50,000. That changed everything, because that income meant I drew almost nothing from my retirement accounts, which meant those accounts kept growing instead of shrinking. I wasn't living off the savings. I was letting them grow while I lived off something I already had. My mind, my experience, my knowledge. Here is what I know now at 75, having been on the other side of the illusion. Health is not an item on your retirement budget. Health is the budget. Everything you want to do with your time, the travel, the grandchildren, the mornings you want to actually enjoy. All of it depends on your physical and cognitive capacity. I spend money on a personal trainer 3 days a week. I spend more on better food than I ever did when I was working. I sleep with a CPAP machine because a sleep study finally revealed the apnea I'd had for probably 15 years. These are not luxuries for a man of means. These are infrastructure costs, and the return on that investment has been measurable. I am stronger, sharper, and more capable at 75 than I was at 72. That is not an accident. We sold the big house in Ohio 2 years ago. We moved somewhere smaller, lower taxes, lower maintenance. The equity freed up went into the market. The mental energy freed up went into living. I don't spend weekends managing a property anymore. I spend weekends with my son, fishing. With Carol, taking the slow drives we always talked about. The golf clubs are still in the garage, but they're beat up now. They have grass and mud on them from every Tuesday and Thursday when the weather holds. They are exactly where they should be, in use, not waiting. If you are near my age, if you are 55 or 60 or 68, and rethinking what retirement can actually look like, I want you to hear this. The most expensive thing I ever did was defer my life. The cheapest thing I ever did was decide at 72 to stop deferring it. The money followed the decision, not the other way around. You still have skills no algorithm can replace. You still have time, though I will not lie to you and tell you it is unlimited. And the single best financial move you can make right now is not a portfolio adjustment. It is the decision to stop treating time like a currency you can save and start spending it the way you'd spend something that expires. Because it does. And the clock has been running the whole time.